Whether true or not, believe it or don't, this is the story we heard. It began in an old one-level farmhouse in Newport News, Virginia, near the water where the summer air always carried the smell of salt and marsh. The house had been in the family for generations. Its wood creaked constantly, even when nobody moved. And at night, the wind seemed to whisper through the thin walls like distant voices. A boy was helping his mother clean out the old cellar beneath the farmhouse. The cellar was cold, damp, and smelled of dirt, mildew, and rusted metal. Most of what sat down there had not been touched in years. While moving old crates and broken tools, the boy discovered a large, heavy-duty chest shoved into the far corner beneath a hanging, cobweb-covered shelf. The chest was old black iron, reinforced with thick bands of steel, and across the front hung a large antique lock stained green with age. "Mom?" the boy asked, brushing dust from the lid. "What is this?" His mother stopped what she was doing and stared at it for a moment before answering. "That belonged to your grandfather." The boy looked back at the chest with curiosity growing in his eyes. "Can we open it?" His mother shook her head slowly. "No, I don't have the key." She walked closer, almost cautiously, as though even standing near the chest made her uncomfortable. "You don't remember your grandfather," she said quietly. "He died almost 10 years before you were born." The boy listened carefully as she continued. He spent most of his life chasing mysteries, trying to understand things most people were smart enough to leave alone. He believed there was more beyond this world than we can see. Sometimes, I think he spent more time searching through darkness than he ever did looking for light. The boy looked at the chest again. "Nobody ever opened it?" She shook her head. "No, not after he died. It's stayed locked ever since." The boy smiled nervously. "Is it cursed?" His mother laughed softly, though something about it sounded forced. "No," she said, "but there's a good chance some things inside might be." She leaned closer to him and lowered her voice. "And if you get too curious, your grandfather might come back to check on you himself." The boy laughed uneasily while his mother straightened up. "There have always been stories in this family," she continued. "Stories about your grandfather and the other side. Some things are better left alone." The boy was disappointed, but he nodded. "Okay." And for days, then weeks, he left the chest untouched. Until one cool summer night. The air drifting through the farmhouse windows carried the familiar scent of salt water and wet earth. Inside the old home, everyone slept in rooms connected to the main living area, separated only by thin walls and narrow doorways. Sometime deep in the night, the boy suddenly woke to the feeling of something poking his shoulder. At first, he thought it was his mother, but when he opened his eyes, he froze. Standing in the far corner of the room was a tall black figure. It was impossibly thin, with long, gangly arms hanging nearly to the floor. Its shoulders bent inward unnaturally, and its body looked less like flesh and more like a shadow that had somehow taken shape. Its eyes were black within blackness itself, empty and endless. The boy could not move. The creature slowly raised one of its long arms. The limbs stretched across the room unnaturally, like darkness crawling over the walls without touching them. Then it pointed, directly toward the fireplace, toward a single brick near the bottom. The boy turned his head to look, and when he looked back, the entity was gone. The boy squeezed his eyes shut. For some strange reason, despite the terror flooding through him moments before, he suddenly felt calm. safe, almost comforted, like a child drifting back to sleep after a nightmare while believing a parent is nearby. The sound of the wind outside faded. The creaking of the farmhouse disappeared. And before long, sleep pulled him under again. By morning, sunlight leaked softly through the thin curtains, casting pale stripes across the wooden floorboards. The smell of salt and marsh drifted through the cracked window screens as seabirds cried somewhere in the distance. The boy sat up slowly in bed. For a moment, he convinced himself it had only been a dream, just a nightmare. But then he remembered the figure, the black eyes, and the brick in the fireplace. A cold feeling crawled through his stomach. Quietly, trying not to wake anyone else in the old farmhouse, he slipped out of bed. The floorboards felt strangely cold beneath his bare feet, almost icy despite the summer heat outside. Every step caused the old wood to creak sharply beneath him, the sounds echoing through the silent house. The fireplace stood in the dim morning light, exactly where the creature had pointed. The boy swallowed nervously and slowly knelt beside it. There, near the bottom. One brick looked slightly uneven, loose. His heartbeat quickened. Carefully, he reached forward and pressed against it. The brick shifted immediately. Dust and bits of crumbling mortar drifted onto the floor as he slowly pulled the brick free from the wall. Behind it was a small hollow space. Dark. Too dark. The boy leaned closer and peered inside. And for the briefest moment, he froze. Two black eyes stared back at him from deep within the hole. The same endless black eyes from the night before. The boy gasped and jerked backward so quickly he nearly fell over. His heart pounded violently in his chest as he rubbed his eyes hard, trying to force himself awake. When he looked again, the eyes were gone. Only darkness remained. Breathing shakily, he leaned closer once more. That was when he noticed something metallic hidden inside the hollow space. Something small. His hand trembled as he slowly reached into the opening. The inside of the wall felt unnaturally cold. For a second, he almost expected something to grab him from within the darkness. But instead, his fingers wrapped around metal. He carefully pulled the object free. An old iron key, heavy, blackened with age, and carved into the top of it were strange symbols he did not recognize. The boy stared at it silently. Then his eyes slowly drifted toward the cellar door, toward the locked chest below the house. The boy slowly looked around the farmhouse. Everything was silent. The morning light barely reached into the main room, and from what he could hear, his mother was still asleep. He tightened his grip around the old iron key. For some strange reason, the key no longer felt like just a piece of metal. It felt alive, warm, almost pulling him forward with a force he could not explain. Toward the cellar, toward the chest. Quietly, he crossed the creaking floorboards and opened the cellar door. The old hinges groaned softly as cold air drifted upward from below. He started down the wooden steps. 1, 2, 3. The deeper he went, the stranger everything felt. Time itself seemed to slow around him. The cellar stairs could not have been more than 12 steps, yet they stretched endlessly downward into shadow, as if the distance had somehow changed. The air grew colder with every step, thick and heavy against his skin. Finally, his feet touched the cellar floor. The boy turned and looked back up the staircase. The light from above looked impossibly far away now, like a tiny square sitting at the end of a tunnel miles long. Fear twisted in his stomach, but something stronger kept pulling him forward. He carefully moved through the darkness, brushing past hanging cobwebs and old shelves until his fingers found the dangling pull string for the cellar light. He tugged it. The ancient bulb flickered weakly overhead, and there it was, the chest, sitting exactly where they had left it, waiting. The boy stared down at the key in his hand. Strange symbols twisted across the metal like markings from another language, symbols that almost seemed to move when he looked too closely. Then he heard it, a whisper, faint, dry and distant. Open what was hidden, and follow where the shadows remember. The boy's breath caught in his throat. Slowly, almost against his own will, he knelt before the chest and slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. He turned it. Clunk. The old lock snapped open and dropped to the cellar floor with a crash so heavy it sounded far louder than it should have, as though something ancient had finally been released. The boy stared at the latch. Then he slowly wrapped his fingers around it and began to lift the lid. Before it could open, a hand touched his shoulder. Wait. The boy jumped and spun around so quickly he nearly fell backward. Standing behind him was his mother, but strangely, she looked completely calm. Her face carried a soft expression, peaceful as a warm spring morning. She smiled gently at him, almost knowingly. So, she said softly, he told you where to find the key. The boy blinked in confusion. Who? Your grandfather. She said it as casually as if she were telling him where to find milk in the kitchen. The boy stared at her nervously. Something came into my room last night, he whispered, but it didn't look anything like Grandpa in the old pictures. His mother nodded slowly. When those who pass on visit our world again, she said quietly, they don't always return looking the way they once did. It takes a great deal for something to walk back through the door of existence. The boy looked uneasily toward the chest. You said the chest wasn't cursed. Yes, his mother replied calmly. I said the chest wasn't cursed. She stepped closer and rested her hand lightly on the old lid. But I never said the things inside it weren't. The cellar suddenly felt even colder. The weak light bulb above them flickered once, then again. His mother sighed softly. I know you're going to look anyway, she said, even if I locked it again, even if I carried it out into the ocean and sank it beneath the bay. You would still come searching for it. The boy said nothing, because deep down, he knew she was right. His mother slowly knelt beside him. So, before you open it, she said quietly, you need to understand something. Her fingers traced across the old wood. Everything inside this chest has a story. The boy slowly lifted the lid the rest of the way. The hinges groaned like something waking from a long sleep. At first glance, the chest appeared filled mostly with old books wrapped carefully in faded cloth. Some were bound in cracked leather, while others looked far older, their pages yellowed and brittle with age. Strange symbols had been burned into several of the covers, matching the markings carved into the key hidden behind the fireplace. Beside the books sat rows of old glass jars filled with cloudy liquid. Some contained blackened coins, others held things the boy could not identify at all. There was an old, tattered doll with one missing eye, several tarnished rings engraved with unfamiliar symbols, bundles of letters tied together with thin black string, and dozens of faded photographs. The cellar felt quieter now. Too quiet. The kind of silence that made every breath feel loud. The boy picked up one of the photographs carefully. It showed several men standing beside a boat near the Virginia coastline sometime long ago. Another showed strangers gathered around a campfire deep in the woods. Some of the pictures were so old the faces had nearly faded away entirely. Then he found something else. Glass plate photographs of Native Americans standing near marshland beneath enormous cypress trees. At the very back of the chest rested a wooden frame. Inside it was an old map. Dark water stains spread across the edges. A trail marked in black ink stretched from the Virginia coastline deep inland through forests and marshes until it ended beneath a single black X. The boy's eyes widened. This looks like a treasure map. His mother said nothing. Instead, she stared at the map like she already regretted opening the chest. Written across the center were the words, "Open what was hidden, and follow where the shadows remember." Beneath it sat a verse, Matthew 6:21, "For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." But underneath the verse was something else, an instruction. The handwriting looked rushed, desperate. To uncover what sleeps beneath the earth, the words must never stop. And beneath that, from dust we came, to dust return. Beneath black tide the lost still yearn. By lantern dim and shadow deep, wake not the ones beneath their sleep. The boy read it twice. A chill crawled slowly down his spine. The cellar suddenly smelled faintly of salt water, then rot. His mother finally spoke. "Your grandfather spent years searching for forgotten history around the Tidewater coast. Shipwrecks, colonial settlements, old native trails." She pointed toward a strange symbol burned into the corner of the map. A crooked skull twisted inside the shape of an anchor. That mark belonged to a pirate crew that disappeared along the Virginia coast centuries ago. The weak cellar light flickered overhead. Some believed they buried something valuable before vanishing forever. The boy leaned closer. "You mean real treasure?" His mother gave a small, uneasy smile. "That's what your grandfather believed." Then her expression changed. The cellar suddenly felt colder, quieter. He and several others followed the map many years ago. The overhead bulb dimmed slightly. "But sometimes," she whispered, "you open a door that does not want to close again." The boy swallowed hard. "What happened?" His mother slowly unfolded the map again. "Your grandfather said the instructions had to be followed exactly." Her voice lowered. "The words were never meant to guide people to treasure." The cellar light buzzed softly. "They were meant to keep something else asleep." Then she began the story. As she spoke, the cellar somehow grew colder. Not normal cold. The kind that settled beneath the skin. The faint smell of salt water drifted through the room, even though no windows were open. They followed the map from the coast inland, through the marshes, until they reached the place marked with the black X. Her voice became quieter. And while they dug, they repeated the words exactly as the map instructed. Softly, she whispered,
"From dust we came, to dust return."
The cellar bulb dimmed lower. The deeper they dug, the more it felt like something beneath them was becoming aware of them, watching them. The boy rubbed his arms nervously. The shadows around the cellar walls somehow looked longer now. Then they began hearing things moving through the woods around them. The boy leaned closer. "Not footsteps," she whispered, "dragging." The sound suddenly echoed softly somewhere behind the cellar shelves. "Drag, drag." The boy froze. His mother continued speaking like she hadn't heard it. They were terrified. Every one of them knew they should leave. Her eyes drifted toward the chest, but none of them could stop digging. The cellar suddenly felt smaller, like the darkness itself had moved closer. Then the sun disappeared. The boy frowned, disappeared. His mother nodded slowly, not setting, gone. The weak cellar bulb buzzed violently. The shadows stopped matching the men standing beside the pit. The boy stared silently, and when the men stopped moving, her voice nearly failed. The shadows didn't. The cellar became silent. Then, a voice whispered softly from somewhere behind the walls. "Don't touch my master's treasure." The boy nearly jumped. His mother slowly looked toward the darkness behind him. Then came the giggling. A child's giggle. Too close. The cellar light flickered violently. One of the men lifted his lantern toward the trees. She paused and saw a small barefoot child standing beside the hole. The boy's mouth went dry. Its skin was pale gray. Its clothes hung in wet, rotten strips, and its eyes, the bulb overhead flickered harder now, were completely black. No pupils, no whites, only darkness. Crack. The boy jumped violently. His mother's face tightened. The child tilted its head farther than it should. Crack. Then it smiled. The cellar smelled stronger now. Rot, salt water, something dead. The smile stretched wider, too wide. The boy felt frozen. Its jaw split downward with wet cracking sounds. The cellar bulb dimmed almost completely, and the lantern flames bent inward toward the hole, as if the darkness itself was breathing. Then came the breathing beneath them, slow, massive, ancient. The floorboards beneath the boy creaked softly. "Your grandfather realized then," she whispered, "the treasure was never meant to be found. It was meant to stay buried." Then, clunk, one of the shovels struck wood. The buried chest. Everything became silent. Then the child whispered softly. You woke him. The ground beneath them moved, not shook, moved. The men screamed as the pit collapsed inward, and from beneath the broken earth, something began pulling itself upward. Then suddenly, the child screamed, "Don't touch my master's treasure!" The voice exploded through the forest. Layered, children, men, women, something else beneath them. The darkness erupted upward from the pit. Too many arms. Long black limbs unfolding over each other, like spiders dragging themselves from deep water. The men backed away, screaming. Then the creature's eyes opened, before its face did. Dozens of pale, glowing eyes splitting open within the darkness beneath the earth, watching, blinking, hungry. The cellar became silent again. The boy stared at his mother. For the first time since telling the story, she looked genuinely afraid. Then, knock. The sound came from inside the chest. The lid shifted slightly on its own. The overhead bulb dimmed lower, and softly, right beside the boy's ear, something whispered, "Don't touch my master's treasure."